My charge was conspiracy to import Class A drugs.
In 2015, the security at London Heathrow Airport was breached by a small group of corrupt baggage handlers. Together with a network of airport outsiders, they managed to smuggle £32 million of cocaine from Brazil to Heathrow's Terminal 5. 32-year-old Londoner Leiona Townsend-Bartley was part of the network. In 2018, she was sentenced to 6 years in prison and sent to HMP Bronzefield.
Don't be in the prison and act like you and officers are friends. You're never going to be friends. You know, they are officers and you are a prisoner, that's it.
This is Matt from Underworld Uncut, and this week we're going inside HMP Bronzefield with ex-offender Leiona. We'll find out what life is really like inside Europe's largest female prison.
I was a mental health support worker. I worked for an organisation that dealt with high-risk mental health in a hostel. So I had a caseload of clients that I used to manage, and I loved my job. I spent maybe 7-8 months there before I found out I was pregnant. And once I got pregnant and then I had my maternity leave, I just never returned back after that. My daughter was actually born early as well. She was 7 weeks early. So she was 3 pounds 10 in weight. Premature. Spent 9 days in ICU, which is the Children's Intensive Care Unit, and then I brought her home. I think at the time I was quite vulnerable due to the news of my daughter. I didn't have the best relationship with her father at the time. I feel like that weighed a lot of pressure on me, and I kind of turned to others for support. I feel like the people that I turned to maybe use that opportunity to take advantage of my situation and kind of use it and manipulate me a little bit. And within a year, I was then sent to prison. So my crime was a conspiracy to import Class A drugs. I was apparently a part of a 15-month conspiracy that the police, the NCA, was involved in, had control of. Which I had nothing to do with, barring maybe I think 2 days, they said, of communication, which was basically around the individual that I was being supported by at the time. And it was literally like, can you send this message? Can you make this call? And I didn't actually seem to have a problem with doing that at the time. So it was quite innocent in my eyes, and that's the reason why I was sent to prison. My charge was conspiracy to import Class A drugs. However, my initial charge was just an evasion of prohibition, which meant that I knew the crime was happening and I didn't inform the police. My sentence was 6 years. And the judge actually said on sentencing that he can see that I was being manipulated throughout the case, like through the notes and stuff. And he knows that I love my daughter and I'm gonna miss her and she's gonna miss me. But because of the severity of the case, I have to be given a custodial sentence. And it was like, okay, slowly start to understand what's happening, Leiona, understand your contribution, no matter how small, and understand the consequences for that because they're not going to go away. So I spent 3 years in custody between 2018 and 2021. So because the case involved so many people, I was never on my own. So my half of the trial was 7 members of the public that I didn't know, barring the one individual. And so there was another lady attached to my case. So when we got found guilty, together in the dock, I found myself supporting her reaction and the way she was behaving, as opposed to attaching myself to what was going on. So that was how it went in the beginning. And then we was sent to Bronzefield in a van. I think we spent maybe 3-4 hours downstairs in the cells. There was a lot of crying going on. There was a lot of stuff happening, and all I could think about was like, oh my God, this girl, like, she's not gonna cope. And when I think back now, I'm just like, what about yourself? But I didn't have time to think about that. It was like, I'm okay. I must be okay because I haven't had a breakdown. I haven't, not adjusted myself to what's happening. I'm quite present. So anyway, so we've got to the prison quite late in the night, and we almost didn't get in because once you get to a prison after a certain time, the gate's closed and that's the last roll check's done and no one else is allowed in. So we would have ended up having to spend the night in the police station until the morning if the driver hadn't got there in time. Luckily, we had quite a nice driver. He was quite bubbly, so he was like, you know what, I'm going to make sure I get you there because if I don't, I know what's going to happen, you know, and it affected his work because he would have had to come back at some point and yeah, whatever. So so we got there in the evening and I was put on the wing at night, so everyone was already locked in. I didn't see anyone until the morning. I think that kind of worked for me. I don't know how I would have reacted if I just walked into a prison in the middle of the day, into the chaos I woke up to the next morning, to be honest. I think I was quite numb. I think there was so much other stuff going on. I think I was still trying to catch up with the feelings of having a baby early, catch up with the feelings of my house burning down. My house caught fire by the sun and burnt down. Catch up with the feelings of being on bail for so long and having to sign them at a police station every day between 9 and 5 for like 8, 9 months. So by the time I got sentenced or remanded, there wasn't really enough time to think about it. So it took about 3 months before I actually cried for the first time with the realization of what had happened and where I was and the fact that I wasn't going home. When I woke up the following morning, as I said to you, it was brought in late at night. So I was brought to the wing like 11 o'clock in the evening. So I think it was like 7:45 that they unlocked the doors. And that was my first ever experience of prison life. I remember I had nothing other than the laundry bag that they sent with me. So now I've got to go out and get breakfast. I've got to go and interact with people. And due to having substances in my system, according to the medics, the medical team, I had diazepam and heroin in my system. Never used those drugs in my life. However, I did previously smoke marijuana. So because of that, I was put onto a house block that houses women that are addictions, like people that are on methadone, people that are on prescribed drugs as well. So I was put onto that wing based on that. So in men's prisons you have, I believe, A-cats, B-cats, C-cat, D-cat jails. However, in women's prisons you aren't categorised. You have literally open prisoners or closed prisoners, which then means that every category of offender is mixed together. So a shoplifter will be mixed with a child killer, for example, until they're either sentenced or removed from the prison and sent somewhere else. But other than that, they are actually mixed together on a daily basis. Some prisons may have categorised wings, like Bronzefield, because Bronzefield is a double A-cat prison, which is quite strange because it's a remand prison. So you can't have tins. Like Downview is a sentence prison, right? So Downview, I can order things like KA canned drinks and corned beef and tuna. I can order that on my canteen. And I've been shipped back to Bronzefield and those things have been removed from my property because I'm now in a double A-cat jail, which is, they're saying is like the most severe prisoners. But I'm like, but this is a remand prison. You know, someone that might have just shoplifted or, I don't know, something silly could get remanded for a short period of time until they go back to court, and this is what they can be confronted with. You know, that mixture of offenders. Like, I remember when I first went to prison, there was ex-sex offenders on my wing, you know, and you don't know that they are. How do you know? There's no board that says, you know, this person's coming. If you don't know, you can't go around and ask every single prisoner, you know, what have you done, what have you done, what have you done, what have you done? Do you know what I mean? You have to kind of navigate, you have to talk to people, the right people, you have to kind of know how to pick up the algorithms of the prison. In Bronzefield, you have 4 house blocks. I know possibly they were starting at 5, which was an open wing, but there are 4 main house blocks. House block 1 would house the women that have addicted to drugs like crack cocaine, heroin, alcoholics, and quite a lot of shoplifters, which also carries a lot of addiction. And then you have house block 2, which houses a lot of the women that came in from police stations, from courts, and were just directly remanded. And that's where they would be housed. It's like an induction wing. And then you have house block 3, which is houses more settled prisoners, maybe people that have complex needs and they can't actually be transferred to another prison, so they actually end up doing the majority of their prison in Bronzefield. All these house blocks are then made up of 4 wings on each house block, which are all connected. The wings eat together, but everyone associates in the evenings together. I was first housed on house block 1 due to substances that were found in my system. So I was housed with the people the people that were addicts and that were on prescribed medication, methadone and things like that. I spent, I think, maybe 4 days on there. And then I was I found an officer that I asked to move me because I was just like, I just don't belong here. And he moved me straight to house block 3, so I didn't have to go into the induction wing. I'd already been in the prison over that induction time, so I don't think it made sense to put me there anyway. But yeah, I got kind of like a free pass, which helped me because I was on a wing with people that have been in prison for quite a long time. So they taught me a lot about what I needed to know to survive and just to be able to get through day to day, really. Bronzefield is quite a erratic prison, I would describe. So it's normally quite noisy, especially if you're living on house block 2. It's again, women have just come in, they're not used to being locked in. So there's a lot of crying, a lot of banging on doors, a lot of stuff, people getting triggered by little things officers are doing, like closing your hatch at night. Women would go on and start banging for hours and hours throughout the night. So I did servery. Did the servery and the laundry and the wing cleaning. So with the servery, you get let out at like 6:30 in the morning. So you can do breakfast, which is just eggs and toast between 7 and 8. 8:45 is movement. Everyone who's got work goes to work, who doesn't gets locked in their cell until lunchtime. And then lunchtime is about 12:30 maybe. Everyone comes back from their work. Everyone has lunch, then we get locked in for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then there's normally visits within that time, so people might get unlocked at 2 o'clock for a visit, and then at 2:15 or 2:30 you get unlocked for movement again in the afternoon. You go to work till maybe like 4:30, come back for dinner. Dinner will be served, and then you have from 4:30 till maybe 6:45 to, shower, socialise, go out for exercise, all that good stuff, order your canteen on the pod and credit and stuff like that. And that's just a typical normal day in Bronzefield, in a nutshell, without all the drama attached. There was drama every day. One person kicks off, the whole wing's getting locked down. That was every day. People will kick off about the silliest little things, not getting let out now when there's 10 minutes to go, and it creates arguments. Someone's like, well, you just wait. And then it's like women bickering 24/7 about nothing, You took the last bit of toast, that bit's browner than my bit. It's just like, honestly, it was a nightmare. 24/7. 24/7. The most volatile moments I experienced in prison is when we was indirectly protesting against something that had happened to one of our women. Maybe someone had been wrongfully sent to the seg, or wrongfully locked behind their doors, or a whole wing could have potentially been locked in because of one individual. So those are the times when you saw people being volatile quite a lot, because you'd have some women saying, just be quiet, they're just doing their job, and then you'd have the other ones that are emotional, like, yeah, but they should have done that, and then someone else jumps in, and it just becomes like a big pile-up like rugby. It literally feels like a rugby match in there every day. So yeah, a lot of bickering about silly stuff, hot water. It could be about anything, the queue. Women used to argue about getting seconds, who's first in the seconds queue. It's like, we haven't even had first. You guys are arguing about the seconds. It's like, yeah, crazy stuff. But you just forget about the outside world because you have to. You can forget you're in prison. I've forgotten for weeks, I just get into my sentence, and it doesn't mean I forget that I'm a mother or forget that I got a child. You have to kind of get on with what's happening in your day every day. So the officers in Bronzefield, you call them by their first name. And when you go to HMP, you're either Mr. whatever or Miss whatever. And my name is my surname. Never was I referred to as my prison number, ever. But I made a choice of referring to myself as my prison number in a way of not communicating with staff in the way that they felt like we were friends, because we were never friends, so I don't think there was any space to have a good relationship with officers. I feel like as an inmate, I had to understand what their job was and know there's a boundary, because at the end of the day, laughy, jokey, kiki, the doors, you're still going to take that key and lock my door at the end of the night, so what does that make us? So I used the officers to my advantage to make sure my days went well, So that if I needed stuff doing, I had officers that were willing to do that for me. I had officers that I'd let into my personal life just a little bit, so they would have, a little bit more respect for the way I behave, what I stand for, the way I maneuver around the prison, because you don't know. So in that respect, yes, I feel like I did have quite a good relationship with officers because, again, with Bronzefield, I went there twice. And the first time I went was my first time, very angry, rebellious, rah, you know, and by the time I went back, I'd transformed my whole being. And it didn't take long for the officers to realise that this is actually who I am, and they respected that and then started to support me. It's just knowing where you are, you know, don't be in the prison and act like you and officers are friends. You're never going to be friends, you know. They are officers and you are a prisoner, that's it. And when shit actually, you know, gets real, you're not on the same side. They are going to turn against you. So we have to stick together as the women, no matter what, because we'd all get in trouble together, you know, but they're not willing to do that. They're never willing to step on our side and fight for us, like how we fight for ourselves. So, yeah. So that's an interesting question. Witnessed suicide, self-harm, severe self-harm, and suicide on a regular basis. That was the hardest thing for me to deal with. And I'm trying to deal with it today. You know, the reality of people taking their life for so many different reasons in that situation, to know that you're in there and you have no one to live for. That breaks my heart because I had a lot of bad days, but I have a child and every day it was like, I have to live for her. I have to, you know, keep my mouth shut for her. I have to not argue for her. I have to, you know, let them do their job for her. Everything was for my daughter. So to know that someone was in there and didn't have anyone, I met women that had no one and they wanted to just take their life. You know, some of them did. So that was hard. I met some amazing women that I still have contact with now, but I think that is just being able to be in that space and meet some amazing women, just like myself, you know, because there's not anyone can go to prison. So I think that's what I'll take away with me from that, is that I learned that anyone can go to prison. Talking is good. You don't know what people have been through unless you talk, you know. So yeah, be vulnerable, take risks. Taught me to give a lot of advice. Yeah, that's what it did. It taught me to give a lot of advice. I believe that prisons can be as positive as the individual makes it. My prison experience, I have no regrets. I feel like it was one of the best experiences of my life. I feel like having support from family and friends is quite an important part of that as well. So I can only speak from my own experiences. But yeah, absolutely, there are positive things. There are a lot of projects and things that you do have access to, you know, if you want it. There's a lot of business opportunities in prison for the inmates to be able to get involved in long term and gain, you know, accredited qualifications that will support their future. So again, prison is as positive as the individual chooses to make it. The system, the criminal justice system, makes prison a place that's not safe. They make it unsafe by the structure. But prison itself is not an unsafe place, no. But the way the system has it designed is definitely dangerous. I was a very different type of person to what I am now, and it took a lot from my own family and friends to understand that adjustment. I found my relationship with faith again. You know, rather than a religion, it was to know that I am being protected. There is something that is keeping me going every single day, away from the physical being of my child and my family. Like, something is keeping me going, you know? So these are the good things that have come out of prison.
Thank you for watching this interview with Leiona Townsend-Bartley about life inside HMP Bronzefield. For more stories from Britain's underworld, from cop killers to fraudsters, make sure to like, hype and subscribe. This is Matt from Underworld Uncut. We'll see you next time.